This is a dragon's blood tree, and its blood is real. First, you need to understand something important. If you've browsed gadgets, read articles about houseplants, or simply bought a potted dragon tree at a garden center, you've probably never seen it like this, because this phenomenon is incredibly rare in home conditions. The vast majority of people who own this plant will never encounter red resin. Never. They'll care for it for years, and it will remain for them nothing more than a beautiful plant with long green leaves. End of story. But why? Why does this happen so rarely? The thing is, red resin isn't just a random secretion. It's a very specific reaction of the plant to certain conditions, to stress, to trauma, to extreme circumstances. Most houseplant dragon trees never find themselves in such situations. They live in safety at optimal temperature, humidity, and light. No one injures them. No one breaks them. They're simply kept in a corner of an apartment and watered occasionally. And the plant stays silent. It lives, it grows, but it keeps its secret. Myths still swirl around this phenomenon. Some people think red resin is a sign of disease. Others are convinced that the plant actually bleeds like an animal. Still others believe it's some kind of magic, that the plant communicates with us through this blood. And while all these ideas capture the imagination, the truth, as always, is far more fascinating than fiction. You only need to understand the history of this remarkable organism. The dragon tree is native to a very specific place on our planet. When we speak of the true dragon's blood tree, *Dracaena Draco*, we're talking about the island of Tenerife, one of the Canary Islands. Here, on these volcanic slopes, among lava fields and under the scorching Atlantic sun, this plant first evolved into the form we know today. This isn't a small houseplant. In nature, the dragon's blood tree can grow towering and massive, powerful with a thick trunk and spreading crown. These trees literally stand on the rocks of the Canary Islands for hundreds of years. Some of them are more than 500 years old. The climate here is extreme. Temperature fluctuations, intense sun, drought. The soil is sparse and poor. And the wind here doesn't just blow, it attacks these trees day after day. Under such conditions, the plant had to develop protection. It had to develop a survival strategy that not only helps it live but allows it to overcome all hardship. And the first people who encountered this tree understood that they were facing something magical. When Europeans first sailed to the Canary Islands, they found an indigenous population already living there, the Guanche. And the Guanche knew well about these trees. They knew about their red resin. According to various historical writings and traditions, the Guanche used this red resin in their rituals and beliefs. There is a belief that in some cultures of the Canary Islands' indigenous inhabitants, the red resin was regarded as a sacred material, connected to the spiritual world. But these were indeed beliefs, passed down from generation to generation, part of their culture and worldview. When Spanish conquerors arrived on the islands and heard about this miraculous red substance secreted by the tree, they gave it a name that would last for centuries. They called it dragon's blood. Why? Because the red resin truly looks like blood. Bright red, viscous, appearing from wounds in the tree's bark, as if a giant mythical dragon had been wounded and was bleeding right before people's eyes. But by this time, people were already beginning to notice that this resin possessed remarkable properties. It hardened in air. It was hard but brittle. And most importantly, it was beautiful. Incredibly beautiful. People began collecting this resin, trading it. By the Middle Ages, dragon's blood had already become a valuable commodity. It was used in medicine. According to medieval sources, people believed that dragon's blood possessed healing properties, that it could cure wounds and diseases. It was used in paint. Artists mixed this resin with oil and obtained a precious red pigment. It was used in cosmetics and perfumery. By the Renaissance, dragon's blood from the Canary Islands had already become one of the most exotic and expensive goods imported to Europe. Imagine this. Spanish traders brought containers of this precious resin to Seville, to Toledo, to Madrid. The prices were astronomical. In some periods of history, dragon's blood was worth more than silver of the same weight. Artists paid incredible sums for just a few grams of this pigment. Why? Because the color they obtained was unique. It wasn't just red. It was a red that seemed alive, that refracted light in a particular way, that literally glowed on canvas. There are paintings in museums created with dragon's blood several centuries ago, and if you look at them carefully, you see that the red color there doesn't fade. It maintains its depth. It maintains its intensity, as if the plant's life remains sealed in this pigment forever. All this time, people didn't understand why the tree secreted this resin. They saw it happening, collected it, traded it, used it. But the mechanism remained a mystery. It seemed to be magic, the magic of nature, and this mystery persisted for centuries. The plant spread throughout the world. European gardeners began cultivating it in greenhouses. Traders brought it to different countries as an exotic specimen. Eventually, when climate control in homes became possible, the dragon's blood tree began appearing in the living rooms of ordinary people. It was beautiful. It was unusual. It required little care. The perfect houseplant. People bought it, grew it, but remained ignorant of its greatest secret. Now let's turn to science. Because science explains everything with such logic and elegance that it becomes even more remarkable than any legend. The red resin of the dragon's blood tree isn't blood in the literal sense, but it certainly performs a function very similar to bodily protection. Within the plant's tissues are special cells that contain red pigment. This pigment consists of organic compounds that evolved in the plant over millions of years to protect it from extreme conditions. When the tree receives a wound, and a wound can be caused by a broken branch, drying bark, physical damage, or even the extreme drying air that creates cracks in the bark, the plant activates a protective mechanism. This isn't a conscious process. It's an instinct for survival, encoded in the plant's genes throughout evolution. Special cells in the plant's tissues release a red substance into the damaged area. This substance has several critical functions. First, it seals the wound. It creates a protective layer that prevents pathogens, fungi, and bacteria from entering the plant. Think of it as the plant's analog to our ability to form a blood clot. The resin hardens and becomes a barrier between the outside world and the plant's living tissues. Second, the red pigment acts as a sun shield. In nature, on the rocks of the Canary Islands, the sun is incredibly intense. Ultraviolet radiation can damage the plant's exposed tissues. The red pigment absorbs some of this radiation and protects the wounded area from additional damage. It's like the plant's natural sunscreen. The thickness of the resin layer directly depends on the intensity of solar radiation in the place where it's secreted. The more ultraviolet light, the thicker the protective layer. Third, and this is the most remarkable, the red resin possesses antimicrobial properties. It prevents the growth of bacteria and fungi in the damaged area. This means the plant doesn't just seal its wound. It actively fights infection using chemicals produced by its own body. It's as if the plant not only bandages its wound but simultaneously applies an antibiotic. The natural defense system works on multiple levels simultaneously. When this red resin dries in the air, it hardens. It becomes strong and brittle at the same time. Throughout history, people noticed that this hardened resin has a remarkable property. It refracts light in a particular way, creating a deep red color that looks almost translucent. That's why artists treasured it. It wasn't just red color. It was color with depth, with history, with life built into the molecules. Now comes the most interesting part. Why does this happen so rarely in home conditions? The dragon's blood tree, grown as a houseplant, lives in a completely different world than its wild relatives. At home, in the controlled climate of an apartment, the temperature is stable. Humidity is controlled. Light is predictable. The soil is rich in nutrients. The plant receives water on schedule. No stress.
No trauma.
No extreme conditions. And here begins the tragedy of untapped potential. When a plant doesn't experience stress, it doesn't activate this protective system. Why should it? There's no need. No threat. Why should the organism waste energy producing this precious red substance when there's no enemy to protect from? It would be inefficient. So the dragon tree simply sleeps. It lives, it grows, it photosynthesizes, but this most mysterious ability remains hidden, like an actor who will never get the role of a lifetime. But there are ways to awaken this plant. And this is what we need to discuss, because if you have a dragon tree, you might be wondering how to witness this beauty yourself. The first and most obvious way is trauma. If you carefully cut the tree's bark, if you create a controlled wound, the plant may respond by secreting red resin. But it's not guaranteed. And it's not recommended to simply injure the plant for spectacle. The plant experiences stress. It suffers. Does it pay off with a beautiful sight? That's a question of ethics for each plant owner. The second way is extreme conditions. If you place the plant in conditions resembling its natural habitat, if you create drought, if you allow the bark to dry intensely, the plant may respond. But again, this is risky. Conditions that are too extreme can kill the plant. A delicate balance is needed. Third, and this is the most natural way, time. Very old dragon's blood trees growing in nature for decades and centuries eventually receive wounds simply from age, from wind, from temperature fluctuations, from natural wear. And at that moment, when the tree is ready to reveal its secret, the world witnesses its redness. If you have a dragon's blood tree at home and want to create optimal conditions for its health and beauty, there are several principles to follow. First, bright light. This plant doesn't like shade. It comes from places with intense sun, and the more light you give it, the happier it will be. A south or west-facing window is ideal. If you don't have such a window, use grow lights. Even a few hours of bright light a day will make a huge difference. Second, minimal watering. This plant is adapted to drought. Its roots love air circulation. If you overwater it, the roots will rot. Check the soil. It should be almost dry before the next watering. Water even less in winter. This plant can survive weeks without water. It's its natural element. Third, good soil. Use a potting mix that drains well. Add perlite. Add river sand. Make sure water doesn't stagnate in the pot. The roots need oxygen. Fourth, warmth. This is a tropical and subtropical plant. The minimum temperature at which it's comfortable is around 15 degrees Celsius, 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Below that, it will begin to suffer. The ideal range is 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, 68 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Avoid cold drafts from windows in winter. Fifth, patience. Yes, that's it. Simply allow the plant to grow at its own pace. Don't worry if it grows slowly. That's normal for this species. Over the years, with proper care, it will grow into a beautiful, mighty plant. And if you're lucky, if the right conditions exist, if the right event occurs, you might become one of those rare people who witnesses its red blood. Here's an interesting point. The dragon's blood tree isn't the only plant that keeps such secrets. There are other plants that secrete colored resins and substances. Some secrete yellow resins, others orange. Each color has its own purpose, its own function in the plant's survival. But dragon's blood remains the most famous, the most mystical, the most valuable, because its history became intertwined with the history of humanity, because people sought it out for centuries, because it inspired artists, healers, traders, philosophers, because in the end, that's the whole essence of the dragon's blood tree. Isn't it? This plant is a metaphor. It's a living symbol that beauty and strength are often hidden, that the most valuable things in the world require time, that miracles happen only when all conditions align correctly. We live in a world where everything rushes, where everything must be quick and easy. But the dragon's blood tree reminds us that some things are worth waiting for. Some things are worth patience. When you look at your dragon's blood tree, when you see its long green leaves, when you feel it bringing oxygen into your home, know that inside this plant sleeps a mystery, sleeps the ability to create something beautiful. And someday, perhaps, the conditions will align. Perhaps a wound or stress will occur, and the plant will reveal its deepest secret. And in that moment, you'll understand why people hunted for this substance for centuries, why artists prayed for it, why this tree was surrounded by legends and myths. It's not just resin. It's a story of survival. It's the biology of beauty. It's natural alchemy that transforms stress into treasure. If this video touched your soul, if you want to know more about such plants, about the wonders of nature that grow right under our noses, write about it in the comments. Share whether you have a dragon's blood tree. Have you ever seen its red blood? What legends have you heard about this plant? Your stories truly interest me. Like this video. If you found something new here, something interesting, subscribe to the channel, because next time we'll explore even more incredible stories of plants that are nothing like they seem. Thank you for being with us. And remember, the world is full of wonders. You just need to know where to look for them.